Okay, guys, today we're going to be going over 7.2, The Great War Begins. This section had a lot of questions. This is a really dense chunk of reading, okay? But that's a good thing because we're going to need a lot of this information later on when we go to write our essays, okay? So we'll go ahead and begin with questions. So question number one, alliances were intended to do what, and what was their actual effect? Well, here under alliances, draw lines, it tells us alliances were intended to promote peace. Why is this not highlighted? Alliances were intended to promote peace, but they had the opposite effect. Okay, so they had the opposite effect. And we know from our other reading that the effect was to drag the entire continent to war. Okay, what would have been a small war in the Balkan states, we'll say, we'll talk about those here in a few minutes. What would have been a small war in some small new nations in Eastern Europe turned into a great, well, what they called the Great War. And it had to do with these alliances and how these countries were so interlocked. Question two asks, what was the first alliance formed and which nations were a part of it? Well, the next thing in the reading here says the first of these alliances had its origins in Bismarck's day. We didn't really read about who Bismarck is, but Otto von Bismarck, he knew that France wanted to avenge their defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. He was sure that France wouldn't attack Germany without help, so Bismarck thought he'd get some help of his own. Okay? In 1882, he formed the Triple Alliance with Italy and Austria-Hungary. Okay, so it was called the Triple Alliance. It was made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Now, I mentioned Germany first because though Germany may or may not have been the most powerful nation in this alliance, it was certainly the central nation to the alliance. It was the most important of this team. They were sort of, at least from our perspective, they were the bad guys. Okay, they were that team. They were the leader of that team. Okay. The next question is, which nations were part of the Triple Entente? To learn that, we're going to have to read down here about the Triple Entente. A rival bloc, that is team, took shape in 1893. France and Russia formed an alliance, and then later Britain joined the alliance. They called this alliance the Triple Entente. Okay, Entente is just a French word that means agreement or alliance. But later, this treaty, this alliance, I should say, became stronger. Now, I know that both of these are alliances. Okay, it's important to understand, though, that the Triple Alliance, that should be capitalized. The Triple Alliance is this team, and the other alliance is not called an alliance, it's called the Triple Entente. So I'll call them teams, even though they were alliances. It just makes things confusing. Okay. Question 4 asks us, look at the map on page 817. Which alliance seemed to have the military advantage? So up here, we'll look at the map. Okay. Now, let's ignore Italy for right now because this map is not helpful for this question. But we could see that Germany has a lot more troops than France. Okay. And so Germany thought, well, we should probably make an alliance with Austria-Hungary and Italy, right? You can see here, Italy's not actually highlighted. It's sort of spoiling something. But France knew what was up. They knew that they needed the help of Russia. And here we see that Russia has a lot more troops. Okay. And then the United Kingdom had some troops to contribute as well. So it's pretty clear that between France and Russia, Germany didn't stand a chance. Not unless the Schlieffen plan worked, and we're not really ready for that question. So, Entente seems to have the military advantage. Now we're going to talk about rivalries and nationalism and how they increased tension. European powers jealously guarded their status. They competed for position in many areas. We remember from imperialism that they were squabbling over pieces of Africa and Asia, but there were other older empires that were struggling to survive in an age of nationalism. These empires were Austria-Hungary and Ottoman Turkey. Now, it's worth noting here that these are also, so it gets confusing needlessly. Austria-Hungary is often called Austria. It's sometimes called the Austrian Empire. Okay. Earlier on, it was the Austrian Empire, but sometimes we will call it Austria. Sometimes we'll call it Austrian Empire. And likewise, Ottoman Turkey is also known as the Ottoman Empire. Okay. So we'll try to keep this consistent, but we might see different terms used for Austria, Austria-Hungary, Austrian Empire. We might see Ottoman Turkey, or we might see Ottoman Empire. It sort of depends on when you're talking about these countries, because earlier in its history, Austria was simply a kingdom, a piece of an empire. Later, it was the Austrian Empire. And then finally, later, it was Austria-Hungary. Just prior to the war, it was called Austria-Hungary. The Ottoman Empire, it was sort of centered around Turkey, but there was a lot more territory that it had. And towards the end of its time, it came to be called Ottoman Turkey. And now, that same territory is just called Turkey because eventually they had a revolution. But let's not get these terms confused, okay? All right. Question 6 asks, how did Germany feel about how the other powers viewed Germany? Germany, the newest of the great powers, was growing into an economic and military powerhouse. Britain felt threatened by this. Germany, in turn, thought the other powers did not give it enough respect. Okay. Germany feared that when Russia caught up with other industrialized nations, that it would become an unbeatable competitor. So Germany felt disrespected by other nations. They thought that they were quite a powerful nation and they were not being treated like that. Next question, which nations competed in the fiercest naval rivalry? This is which two countries had the biggest sort of competition over who could have the best navy, right? With international tensions on the rise, the great powers began to build up their armies and navies. The fiercest competition was the naval rivalry between Britain and Germany. To protect its vast empire, remember imperialism, Britain, they controlled most of Africa, for example. To protect its vast empire, Britain had built the world's most respected navy. As Germany began acquiring overseas colonies, it began to build up its own navy. Okay, Britain became suspicious and started spending more. Germany started spending more, and it became an arms race. So the two countries were Britain and Germany. What is militarism and how did people feel about going to war? So in some sense, militarism is this whole building up your military idea, right? It's the idea that your country should focus on having a powerful offensive force or a powerful defensive force. That you should have a lot of guns in your country. That's sort of what militarism is. It's the belief that you should have a really powerful military. Okay. But down here, we have a definition for it. It says the rise of militarism, or the glorification of the military, also helps to feed the arms race. The militarist tradition painted war in romantic colors. Young men trapped up weapons and dashing cavalry charges. Not at all the sort of conflict they would soon face. So militarism is this idea that fighting war is fun, I guess. It's the idea that you need, it's glorification of the military. So it's saying that, you know, the military is awesome and fighting wars is awesome and things like that. And people thought of war as a good thing. They thought it would be an adventure. World War I, the Great War, it taught us that that is very, very, very not true. Okay. Next question is, what was France bitter about with Germany? We already read about this up here a little bit. When we talked about the formation of the Triple Alliance, sure that France would not attack Germany without help. Okay. Well, they had already fought a war, the Franco-Prussian War. Okay. He knew that France wanted revenge. So we're going to learn about this here, down here. And what was France bitter about with Germany? So it says aggressive nationalism also caused tension. Nationalism was strong in both Germany and France. Germans were proud of their new empire, their new nation's military power and industrial leadership. The French were bitter about their defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, and they wanted to recover the territories of Alsace and Lorraine. So, a little bit of background here, okay? Franco-Prussian War is another way of saying the France and German War. See, earlier, before Germany was a country, one of the most important kingdoms within what's now Germany was called Prussia. Okay, so in some sense, Prussia is just Germany before Germany was Germany. Okay, and France and Prussia had already fought a war. In fact, there have been a series of wars between France and Germany going way back into history. France and Germany historically have been, I mean, enemies for like 1,000 years, basically, a long, long time. And so France was bitter about having lost the most recent of their wars with each other. And they were not really happy about losing these territories called Alsace and Lorraine. So these are territories between the two countries. The territory between France and Germany is really important territory when it comes to world wars. We'll talk about those more as we go into talking about World War II. The next question is, what is Pan-Slavism? And what is Serbia? Okay, Pan-Slavism. So first of all, I want to talk to you guys about Slavs, or the Slavic people. Okay, it's worth getting into this a little bit, and I might not be perfectly accurate with this, but Slav is a term like Jew or Frank or Briton. It's the name of a race of people. They're called the Slavic race or the Slavs. And this is a group of people, if we need to sort of get an idea of what that means, or what this group of people acts like and looks like, you might think of Russians, okay? Many Russians, I think probably most Russians, consider themselves Slavic people. So whatever that means to you, you know. But it's a group of people from an area, originally from an area that is, well, let's just look. Slav. Okay. They're a group of people originally from like this area right here in the world, we think, probably, maybe. I don't want to draw any broad conclusions about a whole race of people, but they're basically Russians, okay? That's the way for us to think about it, okay? And it's actually from this tribe of people, from this group of people, that we get the word slave. Some of the earliest slaves, or at least people called slave, in the world were people who were captured from this area of the world. Now, they didn't invent slavery, they invented that word for slaves. There were slaves before this and slaves after this, but these are the Slavic people. These are Russian people, okay? So our question is, what is Pan-Slavism? Okay, what is Pan-Slavism? So in Eastern Europe, Russia sponsored a powerful form of nationalism called Pan-Slavism. It said that all Slavic people share a common nationality. It said that all Slavic people are of one nation. Okay. Serbia was a proud young nation that considered itself a Slavic nation. Now, it's not part of Russia. It's not even contiguous to Russia, okay? So here's our map. I know this map's not great, but here you have Russia up here. Yeah, you have all this territory, which is the Balkans. These are the Balkans. And down here you have Serbia. Serbia considers itself Slavic. So they consider themselves sort of part of the same nation as Russia. And I'm going to let you guys guess what Austria-Hungary thinks about this, right? So they were supported by Russia. Okay. We're going to go to question 11 here. It says, what multinational empires feared nationalism? Okay, so if Serbia wants to be a Slavic nation, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Austrian Empire, Austria-Hungary, might have some opinions about that. Okay, the Ottoman Empire Ottoman Turkey might also have an opinion about that. Oh, sorry. Two old multinational empires particularly feared rising nationalism. Austria-Hungary worried that nationalism might cause rebellion among the minority populations in its empire. Rebellion among people like the Serbs, right? Ottoman Turkey also felt threatened by nearby new nations like Serbia. If it was created, Serbia's idea of a South Slav state could take territory away from both of these empires. Okay. So there's our answer, right? The old multinational empires were the same ones we mentioned before, Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. They worried that nationalism would cause problems for their empires, like taking territory or causing terrorism within their territories. The next question, question 12, what was the powder keg of Europe? So here you have, I'll show you the powder keg of Europe. Here you have all these new territories trying to make their own sort of racial nations, right? And it's right between these two empires that really didn't want to give up this territory. So the powder keg of Europe is this area right here. And you can kind of think of this area as the area right above Greece, or the area right next to Turkey, or the area right just south of Austria. This area is called the Balkans. The Balkans. Otherwise known as nations in Eastern Europe. So here's Europe. This is to the east, right here, east. Okay. The Balkans are the powder keg of Europe. Now, a little bit of background. These countries had been fighting wars with each other. They had been attacking and fighting with Austria-Hungary for decades at least. They had been fighting the Ottoman Empire for decades at least. This has never been a really peaceful area of the world. And in fact, even today, even right now, the peace that exists, whatever peace exists in this part of the world, it's not a really strong peace. It would be really easy to set this part of the world off again. Going way back into ancient history, this area is the bridge between the Eastern world okay? You might even say the Muslim world and the Christian world, okay? This is the area where those two civilizations, you could say, clashed. I mean, that happened in many other areas, but this is one of the areas where they seriously clashed. So it's a powder keg, always has been, maybe always will be. The powder keg ignites. Before the Great War, the powder keg ignited. Question is, who was killed in Sarajevo? Who killed them and why? What the heck is Sarajevo, Mr. Van Wy? Well, we'll look. The crisis began when Archduke Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary announced that he would visit Sarajevo. What's this guy? That's Otto von Bismarck, or that's Wilhelm. All right. The crisis began when Archduke Francis Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary announced that he would visit Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Now, what's Bosnia? We'll get into the details. We'll look at this on a map, but it's right there with Serbia. It's just north of Serbia, or just west of Serbia. He decided that he would visit Bosnia. Franz Ferdinand was the nephew and heir of the aging Austrian emperor. So he was the next in line. He wasn't in charge of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He wasn't in charge of Austria-Hungary, but he was gonna be very, very soon. Okay, the actual person in charge was getting older, and so he was starting to take over some of the duties as the leader of that empire. And he was assassinated. Okay, Bosnia was under the rule of Austria-Hungary, but it was home to many Serbs and other Slavs, okay, people of Serbia, right? News of this royal visit angered many Serbians. They viewed the Austrians as foreign oppressors. Some members of the Black Hand vowed to take action. The Archduke ignored warnings of anti-Austrian unrest in the city. On this date, he and his wife Sophie rode through Sarajevo in an open car. As the car passed by, a conspirator named Gavrilo Princip seized his chance and fired twice into the car. Moments later, the Archduke and his wife were dead. So here's the skinny. Then Franz Ferdinand, or Francis Ferdinand, was going to be in charge of Austria-Hungary, and they were killed. They were killed by this fella, Gavrilo Princip. He was a Serbian nationalist and a terrorist. His goal, or his group's goal, was to keep Austria-Hungary from controlling Bosnia and to keep them from controlling Serbia. How did Austria respond? How did Austria respond? If terrorists if Serbian terrorists killed the leader or one of the leaders of their empire, how are they going to respond? Well, Austria strikes back. The news shocked Francis Joseph, the emperor. Okay. But the government there saw it as an excuse to crush Serbia. Okay. So Austria sent them an ultimatum, a set of final demands, or final set of demands. To avoid war, Serbia must end all anti-Austrian agitation and punish any Serbian official involved in the plot. It must let Austria join in the investigation. Basically, they had to let Austrians go down there and investigate and start bullying people around. Serbia agreed to most of this, knowing that Austria-Hungary was huge, right? But they couldn't agree to all of it. And this partial refusal gave Austria what it was looking for, an excuse to declare war. So they declared war on Serbia. Well, they demanded that Serbia end the demonstrations against Austria, and they didn't like the way Serbia did that, and so they eventually just invaded. Okay. So the war is begun. Shots are fired. We're going to look at this and we're going to talk about how and why each country entered the war. So to start with, Austria-Hungary entered the war because they wanted to punish Serbia. They thought that Serbia had encouraged terrorism. Germany was allied with Austria-Hungary, and so it entered the war to stand by its dependable ally, Austria-Hungary. Now, Germany had other goals here. Okay? They wanted to defend themselves from France. They thought that France was coming, so that's another reason. Serbia entered the war because they were attacked. They were invaded by Austria-Hungary. Russia, they wanted to defend the Slavs. They wanted to defend the Slavic people in Serbia, and so they entered the war. France knew that they would be facing Germany. They knew that they already had beef with Germany because of the Franco-Prussian War, and so they entered the war. Belgium only entered the war. Belgium was neutral. They did not have an alliance. They didn't want problems with anybody, but they were invaded by Germany. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. And that outraged Britain, who entered the war. So we're going to kind of talk about how this took place here, okay? How the alliances kicked in, okay? First of all, who backed Serbia? It was Russia who backed Serbia. It might be helpful to go back to the map here. Maps help me think about these things. Russia stepped in to back up Serbia. Okay. Once Russia came in to back up Serbia, Germany invaded Belgium. Okay. Germany went through Belgium to try to quickly attack France. Okay. France declared war back on Germany. Okay. Okay. And so we talk about Germany's plan here, okay? Germany knows that it is stuck between Russia, an immense empire with lots of troops, and France, a strong nation with plenty of troops. So Germany's plan was developed by a guy named Schlieffen. It's called the Schlieffen Plan. And it basically involves Germany attacking France through their neighbor, Belgium. Germany and Belgium didn't have a problem with each other. France and Belgium didn't have a problem with each other. And so Germany knew that the soft spot, the easy way into France would be through Belgium. And so that's exactly what Germany did. They attacked through Belgium. This is going to have some repercussions before World War II. France is going to know what's up here, and they're going to build defenses right here. And that's a thing we're going to learn about. But for now, Germany's plan was to quickly sweep through France and defeat their military by swinging around behind them, by flanking them through Belgium. And then, once it had beat France, Germany could focus its troops on Russia. This was the Schlieffen Plan. This is Germany's plan for defeating the two sides of the sandwich here. Okay, so the Schlieffen Plan was Germany's plan to defeat France quickly before facing Russia. It involved invading through Belgium, and it depended on Russia not attacking during the first part of this. They didn't believe that Russia would be fast enough to get their troops up and ready to go to hold up their end of the alliance with France. Okay, they thought that Russia would be slow. The next question, how did countries view going to war? So let's go down here and look. Yeah, they called Russians military the lumbering military. Okay, and that's sort of the way that Germany viewed that. Reaction to the war. The question here, how did countries view the coming war? Before the war, countries had lots of problems at home. Britain had problems with their labor. They had a lot of people protesting their low pay and things like that. They had the issue of home rule in Ireland. Ireland wanted to control itself. Russia had problems that were stirred up by a revolution there. But the outbreak of war brought them relief from their problems. It gave them something to focus on that was not inside problems. A new sense of patriotism united these countries. Governments on both sides said that their countries were fighting for justice and a better world. Young men rushed to enlist, cheered on by women and their elders. Now that war had come at last, it seemed an exciting adventure. So how did countries view the coming war? They were excited. These countries were excited to have something to focus on that was not their own problems. They thought that by fighting these wars, that they would be able to solve some of the world's problems. And they looked at it as perhaps an adventure. Okay. So this sets the stage for what this war is going to look like. We have a lot of people really excited to fight. We have these huge alliances ready to drag everybody in. And we have these huge militaries that they had built to support those alliances. The Great War, it was a war that would disappoint every single person who was excited about it.